Matt, man, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really, attempt number 2 at this now that we got all the audio stuff sorted. But would you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, just professional powerlifter for almost 30 years. 5 all-time world records. 520-pound squat for 24 reps at 42 years old. Lightest man to squat 1,200 pounds when I was 33. One of the only lifters to be able to bench press over 800 and deadlift over 800 in the same meet.
Wow.
Multiple collegiate national record, which is when you and I were really tight on the powerlifting team.
Yep.
Ex Westside Barbell member of the old golden era. Private strength coach. Work with fire departments, huge car dealerships to lower injury rates, and do a lot of assessing and helping pro athletes and pro teams like the Padres dial in their strength conditioning programs.
Yeah, I love it, dude. I love it. One of my favorite stories is when we used to powerlift together. Matt would load the bar up, and he would immediately go over and say, "Hey, bro, I'm about to squat your subtotal," which, if you've never been in powerlifting, your subtotal is your squat and your bench press put together. And I would be more mad, but he was generally right.
Well, a 900-pound squat is a big subtotal for a really good college lifter.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think about it. It's a 500-pound squat and a 400-pound bench.
Yeah, and I was not benching 400. So. I love it, man. Well, what's new?
You gave effort. And that's why we were friends.
I love it, man. I still love the sport, dude. What's new with you since the last time we chatted? You've been a busy guy, man.
Yeah, I just finished my doctorate in July, which made me actually feel dumber than I did going into it. So that started in 2021. The classwork started, and then Human Kinetics had offered or asked me to write a book on conjugate method, since there's not really a lot of, I would consider, highly referenced, detailed books on that level of periodization. So I dove into some of Louis' old books, some of Charles Poliquin's old books, a lot of Dave Tate's library out at Elite FTS, and my own, and created a roughly, I don't know after editing, but 400-page manuscript with around 1,100 references that were probably 50% of them were overseas and had to be translated.
Oh my gosh, dude. What made you want to go back and do that?
I knew at a certain point that physicality wise, I wasn't going to be able to lift, 100 miles an hour. And so for me, it was kind of like, what else is left to do at 100%? Right. And, the money wasn't an issue, so that wasn't a problem. And I started having a little bit more free time as far as, post-COVID is concerned. Because I think even though we've been out of COVID for a handful of years now, a couple years now, it's still affected a lot of in-person coaching. Yeah. And so from about 2015, 16 to 2020, I just didn't have the time, or really the desire. And then as the in-person stuff slowed and the passive stuff progressed, I started having more time to think about getting some of these projects done and classes done. And I only needed 6 more classes, albeit at the 800 level, but I needed 6 more classes to finish. And so I just said, you know what, this is something that I'll remember doing, kind of like a world record. Like, why not go for it?
Yeah, I love it, man. So I want to talk powerlifting to start because, we've obviously known each other forever. I mean, at this point, I was thinking back, it's like 22, 23 years now. And it's funny because sometimes you feel like you really know somebody, but I don't think I'd ever really asked you this question. So I'd love to hear, what do you feel like was the driving success behind everything that you did in powerlifting, right? Like, what pushed you forward, on those training days you didn't want to get in the gym?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I think it was multifactorial. I think some of it had to do with my father passing away at a young age. So the gym drove me into father figures, i.e. Tim Smith and Dawson, which I think I'd introduced to you a couple of times.
Yeah.
And Timmy was a 500-pound bencher at 181 body weight, and Dawson was one of the first guys in 1960s to deadlift over 700 in the Midwest. So they were kind of Muncie legends, and they were they were keen on teaching me stuff at a young age. So I got introduced to not only powerlifting, but structure, gym structure at, say 12 and a half, 13 years old, that just became a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the biggest driving factors that just made me retain it. And then as I got better at it and, at first gained more attention and notoriety about it, about powerlifting, it started to shape my entire life direction because, I get put in the Indianapolis paper, and that's what got the attraction for the Indianapolis Colts. And then they gave me a job shadow, and then I come back with a battle plan to go to school because, I really wasn't college material out of high school.
Yeah.
I worked really hard for a whole year as a welder, and I made really good money, which made it at that point difficult to want to transition into college because when you're making $20 an hour at 18 years old, especially in the late 90s,
Oh yeah.
I could have lived really well on that. And then that was the bottom pay scale. I could have worked my way up to around $35 an hour at that time. And for Muncie, from where we grew up, was a lot of money.
No, it's good
And
money.
so, the old welder heads were telling me, hey man, you're too smart to be in here. You have too many physical gifts. You need to go and pursue, lifting in college. And so that just reaffirmed it when I went and did the job shadow with John Toring at the Colts. And then he gave me the inclination that Ball State was one of the top countries in the world for exercise science, which was 2 blocks away from where I grew up, and the stars aligned.
Yeah.
But all that combined is really what drove me to success. And then meeting Wade and seeing how successful he was as a strength coach, and it really intrigued me because I was kind of introverted, and so I could see Wade being an extrovert in front of dozens of kids and make them all do what he wanted them to do, and it seemed seamless. And I was envious of that. I wanted that ability to be able to walk in and command a certain amount of attention. And for me, inside, I always felt that if I didn't give everything I had as an athlete, I didn't have a right to tell another athlete what to do. And that, I'm not saying that that's true, but in my mind it was. So it pushed me even harder to want to train my ass off because I felt like I needed to be able to walk in and out bench and out squat every athlete that I ever taught, at least at some point in my life, to give them an inclination, because I think it's difficult to know what an athlete feels when he has 600 pounds on his back if you've never been there.
Yeah.
And to go beyond that, almost doubling it, I know that I'm not going to run into an athlete that was stronger than me.
Yeah.
Even to today, I mean, still squatting in the 7s and benching in the 500s at 45 years old. I'm glad I put the work in and I did it smart and didn't get a lot of injuries. And I try to be as much of a role model for people that want to follow the long road as I can.
Yeah. It's so interesting, dude. And again, whenever we talk, I always have these flashbacks to me being 22 years old and being in that gym. We had a lot of good times together. But 2 things. Number 1, I remember the first day I ever saw you. And I was like, yo, I don't know who this guy is, but he is jacked. That is a big dude. I think you were probably wearing like a large or XL t-shirt. So it was hugged up on you pretty good. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but he pushes some weights. But I also remember too, because my story is similar, right? Like that's why I got into powerlifting. I did that internship in the Ball State weight room. And I'm like, yo, like these dudes are pushing real weight. Like I'm not confident. I can't do that. So if I want to tell them to do that, I need some level of experience. And so that's actually how I got into powerlifting. Yeah. It was like, look, I need to have a certain level of strength and just understanding if I want to be a better coach.
Yeah, because I remember you coming down, similar stories, coming down, and you were already doing a lot of work up in the lab, and you were really good with computers and all of that, and you were way ahead of all of us for that. But the physical, in-person, like coaching and lifting, so you were willing to work on your weaknesses, and I always had a lot of respect for that because a lot of people will hide from what they're not good at versus attack what they're not good at.
Yeah,
and,
I love it.
For me, growing up as a kid, being in a car accident and then being homeschooled in first grade because I'm in a hospital bed, it gave me a really low self-esteem physically.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the fire that I needed, that I never wanted to feel like that ever again.
Yeah.
Just helpless and like laying in a bed and not being able to move or do anything. And, I'm walking in the grocery store at like 11 and a half years old with my mom. And, you don't want to be there at 11 years old. You want to be at home or playing with
Right.
your friends. And so I just go drift off to the magazine articles and
Yep.
magazines, which was on, you remember the Ross's grocery store that was right next to Haltman Village?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'm walking in there, and the first aisle of the major aisles was a magazine aisle. And I see like a Muscle and Fitness or some type of magazine, and there's this big NFL guy on the front of it. And I flipped through the pages, and it's showing him lifting weights and giving this like real basic workout in there. And I'm like, I was getting ready to go into sixth grade, but I knew seventh grade was coming soon, and I wanted to
Yep.
play football with my friends. I wanted to put pads on, and I'm watching these guys in this magazine lift weights to play football, and being a fairly smart 11-year-old thinking, well, maybe if I lift weights, I'll do better at football in the next year.
Right.
And because running kind of beat me up because my knees and my ankles really didn't like running much because of the car accident. And so
Yep.
but when I would lift, it didn't really seem to affect it.
Right.
And so that helped tremendously for a gap into football. But, just being a kind of a lucky kid that picked up a magazine and saw football players lifting weights.
Yeah, I love it, man. Something else, we talked about it in our previous show, but I want to circle back to it here because I think it really needs to be brought up. Like, go back if you haven't listen to Matt's first show, but then also just think about just in the intro. I mean, you talked about all the world records, right? And not just the thing that's always impressed me about you, you've always been strong outside of gear. Like I've known you your whole life. You've always been strong raw. Then you could put the gear on and you could be strong. And then when it was all over, you got rid of all the gear again. You went back and you were strong raw.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing about all that is so many guys, and we know them, right? Because we've seen them, they're amazingly strong for like 2-3 years, right? It's like this supernova. And then like a supernova does, it fizzles out. You never hear from them again. You've always been healthy, right? You've stayed incredibly healthy based on the amount of years you've trained and the weights that you've been pushing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you've been able to stay healthy. What's the secret sauce, man?
The secret sauce is patience, honestly. I had gifts coming up, but I never pushed too hard, too fast. I never had these massive strength gains. It was almost like I got 10 or 20 pounds stronger every year on every lift for 25 years. That's how I got strong. I think I never looked for the 100-pound jumps. That's one. Two, when something hurt or didn't feel right, I didn't motor through it. I actually outsmarted it. And by meaning I found a new exercise that had a better stimulus that didn't hurt. So I was always cautious or thoughtful of how my body was feeling, which really gravitated me to conjugate training because you had multiple exercises with a specific task in a general sense of a way to do it. So you basically like not squatting exactly with a straight bar and straight weight all the time. You're doing bands with, say, a safety bar one week and then a straight bar with chains and then a box squat and then a free squat. And we were mastering that in college. And a lot of that was coming from Louis. And I noticed that the more variety that I built into my training program, the more effective volume that I could withstand within a year. And again, reading like A.S. Mevdiev's books, they say the exact same thing. And I think that just being able to listen to my body and being patient and enjoying the training process versus the outcome really set me up for long-term failure, or long-term success.
Yeah.
I still consider myself a failure, but long-term success. So that's the biggest thing that I think people can try to aspire to, because it's interesting. I go to the Padres and these guys some of them are 17 years old and they're drafted out of high school, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and they're freakish athletes, but they're almost gifted athletes, not necessarily work hard athletes.
Yep.
And I think that as they progress up from 3A to 2A to 1A to the majors, they start realizing the amount of work that it's going to take for most of those guys to be able to play at that level. Yep. And that's why you have a lot of them fizzle out and get traded a bunch and never really make it to the majors.
Yeah.
Where I think in football and basketball especially, you are either a super animal freak and you are going to get picked up by the NBA, or there's nowhere really else to go. Like you can go to like NBA Europe or something, but
Yeah,
We
sure.
both know that you don't see that many players go to NBA Europe and then come back to the NBA every once in a great while,
It's very hard. Yeah.
but not very common. So I think that the developmental time that it takes to be a good basketball or football player, your window of opportunity is so much more limited. Whereas
Yes.
baseball, they want to build you up slower, but there's a lot more people that
Yeah.
are coming from all over the world. And you have to think about it honestly, like baseball, for instance, is a worldwide sport. It's almost like soccer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of countries that play baseball, whereas like American football, basketball is somewhat, but I mean, there's only so many different genetic people that are going to be able to be 6'6" to 6'10", and
Yeah.
then be able to be quick enough and athletic enough at that height to
Yeah.
be able to pick up a basketball and go pro no matter where you're at in the world.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but I think that the time that you can be a great lifter, I think everyone maybe is not capable of breaking a world record, but they're definitely able to be nationally ranked if they want to work hard enough and long enough.
Yeah. No, I love that. Another guy that I always looked up to was Brad Gillingham, right?
Mm.
Just great lineage. And that dude, I just remember I felt like every year he was setting a deadlift PR. Now, granted, it might be 10 pounds, but hey, when you're going from 810 to 820, 820 to 830, and you're in your mid 40s, like, yo, that's impressive.
Mm.
And so you make a great point, but you got to be patient. And
Yeah.
that's something that you gotta be okay with. Hey, and the other thing that people don't always respect about powerlifting, if you haven't competed, is that it's very rare. You might not have struggled with this, but I did. It's very rare that all three lifts are going up at the same time. Sometimes your bench is kind of stuck and your squat's going up, or your squat's stagnant, but your deadlift is going up. So it's not like this linear process where you're
Yeah.
like, every meet I'm adding 50 pounds to my total. Sometimes it goes that way, but man, you
Yeah.
have to be patient. You have to look at it over the course of 5 or 10 years versus 5 months.
Yeah, and I think that really drives home a very good point that lifting teaches you that life isn't linear.
Yes. Yes.
And that if you think that, that going from A to B is going to be a straight line, whether it be financial or lifting or any other endeavor, it's usually bouts of like block training. It's bouts of flatness with small little peaks along the
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
It's nothing goes just like this. Now, maybe
Yep.
on a long-term scale, again, back to long-term, on a long-term scale from A to B, it may appear a straight line if you back away far enough
Yeah.
years to look at it, right?
Yeah. It's a
Like,
great
was I
point.
stronger at 35 than I was at 21? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that I didn't stick. I
Yes.
remember I first go over to Louis and train in my bench. I've been stuck at like 500 for a year, probably
Yeah.
maybe longer. And Louis telling me that I need more arm work, more tricep work, blah blah blah. And it didn't work immediately, but 6 months later, I'm doing like 520. Then I do 550. Then I do 570. And then 5-6 years later, I'm doing in the sixes and the sevens and then the eights. And
It's
so,
crazy.
yeah, it wasn't like an immediate gratification. And I think that's why you see a lot of people bow out of not only lifting and getting stronger, but they just bow out of a lot of things in life. They just want this security bubble that, okay, maybe I can't make it to here. So,
Yeah.
but I know that I'm comfortable here, down here. So
Yes.
I'm just going to stay in this bubble and never develop myself. And for me, I didn't even want to be in the fucking bubble. I wanted to just be
Right.
floating in air, trying to grab as high as I could and reach for the stars,
I
like
love it.
Icarus, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
luckily it worked out for me, but luck is a matter of persistence and positioning.
Yeah. I like
You know
that.
what I mean?
I like that. So this is another thing I don't think I ever asked you. Like, how much time did you spend just studying like pure powerlifting, like technique? Okay, so like you're going from 5 to 600 pounds, right? And you realize, oh, I need more triceps. Like, how much time was there, like going in and like dissecting your lifts? Like, oh, now this is my new weakness, and I need to attack that. Was that like an everyday thing, like after every meet? Like, how did you approach that?
Well, it depended. Like, back in that day, you couldn't just set your phone up and video it.
Yeah,
So we
true,
had to base it off of like, what coaches saw, what Louis saw,
Sure.
what your meet performance was and your number. I think that today's generation of lifters have a little bit more of an advantage because it's so easy to film something
Yes.
and just immediately watch it and make critiques. But I
Yes.
find it interesting that although that is present in today, that so many people shy away from doing anything in person anymore. It's
Yeah.
like they can
Agreed.
just learn. They think they can learn everything from YouTube, and
Yes.
that doesn't necessarily translate over to what you think. And I think one of the biggest factors that I had was I was willing to drive, and you had been with me
Yeah.
on multiple occasions,
Yeah.
3 hours one way just to go fucking squat to learn something that made me 2% better in the next 2 months.
Right.
Versus most people like, man, I don't want to go. That's too far. It's too much gas money. It's too much personal time. It's
Yeah.
too much this. And I wanted to be the best I could at all costs. And that was for me a marginal payment,
Yeah. I love it.
which ended up shaping my life much differently later down the road. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that until Louis kind of showed me where to get those books, because you remember like JC had went to we had a big connection to IPI or IMG Academy.
Yep.
And that's where one of the guys we know went and learned a bunch of stuff and brought it back. But I wouldn't say that JC had a great connection with a lot of the Russian manuals. I think
Yeah.
that we were all kind of confused on where was Louis getting all this information and where were these books. And then I hear of the Livonia Press, up in Michigan.
Yep.
And that's when I started getting those books sent to me by Bud Charinga and started reading them. And at first they made 0 cents,
Yep.
because
It's rough. It's rough reading.
they're hard to read. And, as I started gaining more and more knowledge in the area and fine tuning my techniques, Dr. Kramer at Ball State was a huge factor in that because he knew on a person to person basis, Zatsiorsky, which was where Louis was in book wise getting most of his information.
Yeah.
And so to have that direct connection where Kramer actually gave me his email and gave me his contact information, I was able to, not abuse it, but bounce ideas off of him and
Yeah.
bring it back and even more improve on things that maybe would read a certain way, but actually didn't mean what they were appearing in the book.
Mm.
Because it was hard to take that stuff as non-literal because the writing of it was so awkward and different, from what
Clunky,
we had
yeah.
seen.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was just, it was fun for me. It was like a cat and mouse game that I never got tired of. I was always wanting to chase progression. I always
Yeah.
wanted to learn something new. And I always wanted to eventually get it to where I could help other people digest it faster. And I think that's one of my highest qualities. The Padres guys this last week were like, man, these complex things, you know how to explain them so well. And I think that was helpful to know that knowledge and then go try to apply it in the military because those guys barely graduated high school, most of them.
Yeah.
And so if you come at them with, force velocity curves and, mass times acceleration and all this,
Right.
they're going to be losing them even though you might sound smart.
Yeah.
So you have to explain it in very simplistic terms for persons without backgrounds can understand. And that's where the Russians' manuals really fall short because they weren't written for the average person. They were written for other high-level, oftentimes doctorate-level coaches and other
yeah.
researchers. So
Yep.
if you weren't actively applying any of that information, it could be really difficult to understand and actually utilize.
Yeah, I love it, man. And I think that's a great sign of mastery, just as a whole. If you can take really complex topics and help somebody like really understand it, it doesn't even have to be a coach. Like one of my things is, hey, can I go explain it to one of my kids? Right? No experience. Like, hey, can I take this concept? And if I can't do that at some level, then I need to own that topic better.
Yeah,
It's hard.
You're absolutely right. And the great coaches are like that because honestly, if you're working with pro athletes, they don't give a fuck why it works.
No, none.
They just want it to work.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you have to get them to where you can explain it to where they want to buy in more, but not overdo it to where you're losing connection with that person. And I think that's an art form.
Yeah.
Both you and I still practice to this day. I think,
Yeah.
if we were to do another podcast like this in 5 years, our coaching philosophies are going to change a little bit based on the experiences that we have and the generations that changed along with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, that hard-nosed, badass coaching system works really well, I say, up until about 2015.
Yeah.
And then you see this massive trend in the next generation, and they're just mentally softer.
Yeah. They're not going to respond to that.
They don't run well on negative energy. And so, although I think that there's this aura about training with Louie or training with Westside Barbell, I think if people actually lived it in that time, that they wouldn't be able to handle it because they don't understand the level of pressure that was there and the amount of skin thickness that you had to have in order to get that level of elite coaching.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing sugar-coated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure.
Not only if you sucked there, did you feel like you sucked, you got told by 5 or 6 other guys that were probably stronger than you that you sucked too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a good time, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you, again, gear, world records, raw, world records, but there comes a time and a place where you're like, okay, I probably can't do this forever. Was there like a distinct moment in time, or was there like a series of events that led you to that point where you're like, maybe time is running out on this?
I never had something tell me physically that my time was running out. It was a lot of about 35. I'd already been lifting raw for a handful of years. I broke some squat world records and a total world record, and I was staying in the top 1 to 2 or 3 in the world every year. And I was at a conference, I think I was at Swiss at 2016 in Toronto.
Okay.
And Eddie was already about 50 or 55 maybe, because, well, no, he would have been about 50 because he's like 57 right now.
Okay.
So he's about 57, maybe 49 or 50, 49, 50, and I'm 35. And I asked him, I said, when do you feel if you retired, you would have sustained far less damage and injury now, like your age now? And he said, oh, without a doubt, 38. He's like, 38, if I'd have stopped at 38 doing crazy shit, he goes, I probably would have saved my knee, my hips would have lasted a lot longer, and I wouldn't be walking around like I'm crippled. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I've done this for so long. I've skated away from not having any injuries. I'm going to say 38 is the cutoff point.
Yeah.
Regardless of how everybody feels, because I could have went probably another couple of years.
Probably, yeah.
But for me personally, it was almost like you've donated your whole life to this one goal, this one simplistic goal that slowly sucks everything away from your being. Yeah. Like everything that was me was my training. If I had a girlfriend at the time that wanted me to be there for Christmas and it was a squat day, I'm not going to Christmas.
Yeah. Wow.
If it was like family member stuff, I'm not going if I have to compete. If it's in like that 12 or 15 week cycle where I know that I sit in a car for 3 or 4 hours to go home for a birthday or an Easter and my back's going to be screwed up the next day for training, I didn't do it. I mean, literally didn't do it. I was 100% all in. And I think you can only do that so long until it just wears you down. And, I think the first inclination of that was 2014. I had just broke the raw squat record. So now I had been a conjugate lifter under Louis Simmons that had conquered gear and then took the gear off and conquered non-equipped lifting.
Yeah.
Which, basically took the asterisk away from, this only works for equipped lifting. Because you hear that shit all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I come back from that motorcycle ride. I ride to Nova Scotia and all the way back down the East Coast and back.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm starting to realize that was so much fun. And that was the first time in my entire adult life, this is at 35 or 34 years old, that I had taken more than 1 week off of training. And my body felt so good.
Yeah.
I was like, is this telling me something?
Yeah.
And, that the training that it took to sustain that level of world-class strength was just so physically tiring. It wasn't like my joints hurt.
Right.
It wasn't like my back was bad. It wasn't like I had screwed up my knees. It was just like the amount of energy required for that started to become sleeping like 9 hours during a normal night and then taking an hour to a 2 hour nap, probably 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So on the days that I didn't have full work schedules, it was sleep, eat, and train. And that's
Yeah.
it. Like zero, nothing. Like,
Yeah.
not going to go ride my motorcycle. I'm not going to go bend over my hood and work on one of my muscle cars. I'm going to only focus on this.
Wow.
And I knew that if I kept pushing another year or two, and I talked a long time with Serrano, my doctor, about that. And he goes, your blood work's looking pretty good and healthy right now. He goes, but I think in the next year or two, we're going to start seeing some changes just based on some of these scales,
Yeah.
You can see my blood pressure was just slightly starting to come up.
Yep.
My triglycerides were coming a little bit out of normal range.
Yep.
Just little tiny stuff that I wasn't unhealthy yet, but to sustain that level of weight
Yeah.
and that level of pressure was just starting to really wear me down.
Yeah.
And so I retire in 18. And it's funny, what kind of really set me back after that was I'm warming up, and I had literally the best training cycle I'd ever had. I squatted 840 for a double in a belt.
Wow.
And the
Gosh.
world record was my world record was 832. So I just did an 8 pound over the all-time world record for a double.
Yeah.
And I felt pretty good. I benched 585, which is 645s on each side for a triple. And it was easy. I mean, the first one was looked like as fast as a decent athlete could move, like 185.
Wow.
And I had accidentally deadlifted in training, which is the only lift that I ever had in the gym that was better than in a meet. I deadlifted 825 for a double.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah, I was on the moon. I was ready to hit, I was going to be the first dude to total under super heavyweight 2,300 easy. I go to Mark Bell's meet in San Francisco, and I do my last warm up at 7. It was like 771 or 78 was the kilo on it.
Yeah.
And I move it so fast that I knock L3 out of place when I re-rack it. It was just
gosh.
I got it on the bottom, and I was just like, boom. And it felt so good. I'm like, I'm going to squat at least 915. And remember, at that time, the all-time world record squat was 913 by Don Reinhold in 1976.
Yeah.
I'm doing it at 290 body weight, not 380.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And I didn't feel anything happen, but as soon as I racked it into the monolift, I took the pressure off of the bar, and I felt it just go, meh. And it was like the one side was just pissed, and I'm like, oh shit. So I walk out and grind an 815, like in so much pain, it was unbelievable. And the rest of the meet, I just basically said, I can't do this, because I already knew that I wasn't going to hit the total I wanted to do.
Yeah.
My buddy said, fuck it, let's get out of here. And we went and drove around, San Francisco and the Bay Area, and just kind of went and looked at stuff. And I wasn't like having trouble walking, but my back was really pissed. And that was the meet, make or break. I knew I was going to retire. So 2018, I mend it back in like a month, and it feels great, and I'm still super strong. So I'm still doing this little tiny stuff. Well, Michael Hearn texts me, and he's like, how many times do you think you can squat 500? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't do that shit. You know what I mean? So he does it, and he gets like 14 reps.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, I can beat that easy. So I get under the bar, and I do 20, and I didn't even train for it. Right. So I do 500 for 20 because I'm already real deep into the warm-ups that I've been doing.
Yeah.
I do it for 20, and then I'm like, shit. I'm like, what's the most anybody's ever done over 500 for?
Right.
And then somebody looks it up and goes, dude, Tom Platz did 23 reps with like 520 in 1990 or 89.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could train for that. So I end up cutting and getting real lean. I'm like 252. I lose like 35 pounds and just get shredded.
Yeah.
And then I decide the next year that I'm going to put a little bit of weight back on and try to break Platz's record.
Okay.
That kind of sparked something new to try. It's not a 1 rep max.
Sure.
And so in 2022, I squat 520 for 24.
Wow.
And then I think Hooper, that world's strongest man, did it and tied me but his form looked like shit after 15. He was just so strong he could muscle it all out.
Right.
Whereas mine was like perfect every rep.
Sure.
And then after that, I was like, okay, the competition shit's is burned out of me now at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one I did not recover from very well. And that was probably because I was 42 years old.
Yeah.
I laid on the ground for like 15 minutes in damn near a blackout zone. And I felt like I had the flu for like a month.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, it was like way longer than I had ever had before. And so I started realizing that I was paying for those things way longer than I was even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so now I still hit shit that's kind of hard every once in a while, but I don't.
Right.
I benched 530 maybe like a month ago, and it was still pretty easy.
No, it looked strong, man.
I did a squat maybe about 2 months ago. I haven't posted yet. I keep forgetting to. I squatted 675 and then stood it, and then they added another 50, 725, and then hit it, and then they added another 25. So it was 775 and squatted that. Wow. And I was only weighing like 251. So, but then I paid for that a little longer than I thought I would too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just like, I think I don't want to. I decided that when I felt like the weightlifting was going to start detrimenting my health.
Yep.
That's when I decided to set back and then push the doctorate.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So, okay, this is good timing then, because what I'd love to hear next is, obviously you were a big guy. Like what was the most you ever weighed?
317.
Okay. So 317 and down to, you've been as low as what, 251?
I was 239 I got down to 239 last year, and I was about 11.1% body fat.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. So if you've never been around a 317-pound dude, that's a ton of calories, right?
7,500 to be exact.
Oh my God. 7,500 calories a day. You're training balls to the wall, right? You're really pushing yourself. Like you said, you kind of have this realization of, okay, I can't do this forever. What are the first steps like to shift out of, I'm going to be the biggest, strongest power lifter, to, hey man, I want to clean some things up. I want to tighten my diet up. What were the first steps there?
Yeah,
really just try to get yourself
very
in shape.
Similar. It was just, I went from eating roughly five 1,500, 1,400 calorie meals a day down to 3 1,500 calorie meals a day. So I'm still at 4,500. And within like 4 months, I dropped like 35 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Just from cutting 2 meals out, but I was still eating a boatload of beef and rice.
What does a 1,500 calorie meal look like, dude? Because I mean, that's detailed. Like how much?
I can tell you almost exactly. I would do 80-20 beef, right? Yep. Or 85-15, depending on what was at the store, because I needed the fat.
Yep.
And it tasted better when I reheated it.
For
I'd make a bunch of meals. I would do two cups of white rice cooked in a rice cooker with about a half a stick of like grass-fed butter.
Yep.
So it didn't have a lot of butter in it per cup, but it had a lot of butter in it per like 10 that I made.
Yeah, sure. So
it still had a little bit of like buttery flavor, but it wasn't like drenched.
Yes.
So I would do that, and then I would run about 12 to 14 ounces of ground beef, and then I would run about a quarter of a cup to a half a cup of shredded cheddar, and then I would do like taco seasoning in the beef.
Yeah.
And that rounded out with a portion size. It was about between 1,300 calories.
Wow. Where are you buying your food from, dude? You got to go to Costco, right? Yeah. Shout out to Costco.
Honestly, I like the taste of it. The meat that they had in Costco, the grass-fed beef and some of the fillets that I would get, we would tear them up. You know, I have a video of me and Maddox eating. And then we would throw some carrots in there. We would do like basically Stan Efferding helped me write it all out.
Yeah.
And then I would eat a boatload of pistachios, almonds, and Greek yogurt.
Yeah.
And I would get like the 2% Greek yogurt, so it was higher calorie.
Yeah.
Plus, I needed the fat calories. But you would be surprised if you wanted to gain good weight and not have it be a lot of fat. The power of being able to add in a handful of pistachios 2 to 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Because they're super high calorie. So we would just do that. And, you know, then I'd have a cheat meal every 3 to 4 days, and I would just eat kind of within reason whatever I wanted. If pizza sounded good or whatever, but I never ate like an asshole every day. It was
Yeah.
kind of like I ate like an asshole every 3. Then I would
Yeah.
eat then if I was cutting, I'd eat like an asshole every 5, and then I
Yep.
stabled down to every week. So every 7 days, I would, if I wanted pizza or I wanted a hamburger or I wanted something else, it would just go 3 days for 60 days, then 5 days for 60 days, and then permanently settle on 7. And I
Yeah.
noticed that my digestive system worked really well that way because if I was eating something terrible after the 5 to 7 day transition, it
Yep.
just ripped my stomach up and I would
Oh
just
yeah,
be on
you
the
know.
toilet.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're eating clean. So what I'll
Yes.
do a lot of time with clients that are not losing weight, I'll say, okay, you're going to go out and eat with me, and I'll make them order something really shitty, and then I'll keep their time for like an hour after they eat it. And if they're not running to the bathroom, shit in their pants, they're lying to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. That's a
Yeah,
great point,
because
actually. Yeah.
yeah, because when I was trying to stay 317, I had to eat a cheat meal about every other day.
Yeah.
When I went to 3 after 60 days and then flipped to 5, I'd eat the cheat meal and I'd be on the toilet in like 20 minutes.
Yeah. You just don't feel good. You
No, you
don't
don't
feel
feel
good.
good, and your stomach doesn't know how to digest any of that processed shit,
Yeah.
the gluten and all the poor processed dairy. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times, if I have clients, I'll watch them, and if their gut's not screwed up, they're in big
Yeah.
trouble.
That's
You know what I mean?
interesting. Dude, did you ever hear Dave tell the story about how they used to bulk when he was like complaining to J.M. Blakely about how he couldn't put on weight? And J.M.'s
Yeah, I
like
remember them saying something about
the
like
large
mixing these shakes up that were like, was
he
it?
told he
It was like
told
a gallon
me
of ice cream and like some other.
that was one. He told me JM made him because he was like, I can't put on weight, whatever I do. And JM's like, you need to order a large pepperoni pizza. And when it comes to your house, you don't just eat the pizza, you take olive oil and put olive oil all over the entire top of it, right? And so Dave tells the story, it's so hilarious. But he's like, bro, I got like 2 pieces in. And I'm thinking, I got to finish this whole thing. He's talking about sweating, staring at the pizza. But
Which
he's
is
like, yeah,
real.
oh, I
Because
know.
I think Dave got up to maybe 305, and I was pushing
Yes.
another 10 pounds more than that. But I never did it by eating insanely dirty.
Yes.
I'm not saying I ate clean by any means, but I never
Right.
went like hog wild like every day on like I wouldn't go get like 4 double quarter pounders or anything.
Yeah. But
You
again, that's
know?
the evolution of the sport, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how they did it. And then, now your generation, our generation,
Yeah.
whatever, we get smarter, right? And so
Yeah.
we don't make those same mistakes. So hopefully the
Yeah.
next generation is even better about adding
Well,
muscle, or when it's time to cut weight, you're
you
smarter
hope
about it.
so, but I think we're seeing, our generation was kind of the one that learned from the past generation's mistakes, and now
Yeah.
the new generation's making the same mistakes that the old generation was telling us was the problem because
Right.
of they want to grab everything on social media.
Yeah.
So if eating super clean and showing everybody how to do that properly is not popular. What's
Yeah.
popular is saying, I'm going to eat 2 gallons of ice cream while I sit down, or I'm going to go order, this exorbitant amount of food through the drive-through, and then you
Right.
get 5 million views, and then it just basically popularizes poor habits,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
kids see that and do it, and they emulate. Whereas versus
Yeah.
in our generation, you couldn't really emulate people like that because nobody had a social media.
Right. No, you have to go and like actually talk to people. Right.
Yeah,
You either have to go to them or pick up a phone call. I know that's a
yeah,
wild concept these days, but
absolutely.
um okay, so another thing. Obviously, you're still you still got a ton of strength, right? You're still squatting 7, benching 5, like it is there. What do you feel like you've done or what changes maybe have you made to your training over the last couple of years, especially the last 3, right? After you did the 500, what did you change to allow you to continue to feel good and train and maintain that strength at the same time? Because most
I
people can't do that.
Yeah, I back down a little bit of my max effort training. I just go to where I know I feel like I will recover,
Yeah.
but I'm still maintaining my speed work.
Yeah.
So my dynamic work, and that's why I try to tell people all the time. Um, being able to flex fast is far more powerful, not only in sports but also in anti-aging than being able to
Yes.
strain.
Yeah. You're absolutely
And
right.
you'll if you look back, and I haven't posted any in a while, but if you look back like on my Instagram page, you'll see me doing a lot of box jumps.
Yeah.
You'll see me doing a lot of speed work,
Yep.
and that retains those type 2X fibers
Yeah.
and the ability to be able to strain when you want to. and it's still as neurologically taxing, but it's not as tissue taxing, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's something Dr. Newton used to always talk about. I mean, he blew my mind, but like I remember when I was a fresh-faced GA, and he's just like, look, man, most people think, in his Aussie accent, of course, he's like, most people think strength is the first thing that deteriorates with age. He's like, actually, it's power.
Yeah.
He's like, so you have to preserve your power. And that stuck with me my entire life. That's why we have our old, like, people come in walkers, and they're going to throw a volleyball against a wall in our gym because it helps retain those power and those, those fast twitch fibers.
Yeah, I still do speed work with roughly the same weights that I used to when I was world class.
Yeah.
185 to 200 on the bar with 100 pounds of band or 120 pounds of chain, and I can still move it at over 1 meter per second.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild.
I remember the first time I met Charles, he came to my seminar. Yeah. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but this is like 2015. I'm doing a seminar, maybe 14. I'm out in Colorado. I know of Charles from the T Nation stuff and all that shit, and I've seen him speak at different conferences. And I get this email, and he's like, "Hey, this is Charles Poliquin. I live like 30 minutes from where you're doing the seminar in Colorado. Do you mind if I come by and hang out?" And I'm like, "Well, fuck yeah, you can." You know what I mean? But now the pressure's on.
Yeah,
because I'm talking to other lifters, but now this dude's like a savant.
He's an OG, yeah.
And I'm like, oh shit, So now I'm really digging in my notes and making sure I can do right. Well, I tell the class that I can move, and at this time I'm still one of the top lifters in the world. I can move 185 with a double red band and 3 chain on each side, so 2 accommodative resistances with this weight.
Yeah.
And the class is like, oh shit, that's crazy, because they were struggling with like 95 and like 1 band.
Right.
And so after the class is over, I'm going to work out. And Charles comes up to me and he goes, "You said that you can move how much weight and what?" I said, 185 pounds on the bar, a double red band, which is 100 pounds of band tension, and 120 pounds of chain. So if we add that up really quick, we're looking at like 405.
Yeah.
Ish, 400 range. Yeah. He goes, "You're full of shit, man." He goes, "I trained 2 Olympic gold medal throwers and they couldn't do that." And I said, "Well, I can fucking show you if you want." So I bet him $100. I bet him $100 and I bet him a meal at Famous Dave's, because I had eaten there a couple of times when I was working out in Colorado with the military.
Yeah.
We were kind of in between his house and where we were at.
Okay.
And I said, $100 and you got to buy dinner at Famous Dave's. Just being funny.
Yeah.
He fucking whips out 100 and he's like, "It's on, do it." So I warm up a little bit, not much.
Yeah.
Then I go to 185 on the bar, hit that. Then I do 185 with the double red band, hit that. Then put the chains on, and they get the accelerometer out, because at that point, the gym aware stuff I don't think was around, or they didn't have it.
Just like a Tendo or something?
It was a Tendo.
Yeah.
1.13.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Bro, that is hauling.
Yeah, it was hauling ass. But I mean, that's when I was benching like 585 for a triple.
Sure.
And the first rep of 585 looked like an RPE of about 7.
Yeah.
So
wow.
He was like, "Holy fuck." And I was like, "Dude, I fucking told you." And so ever since then, we became really good friends, and we started doing seminars together.
Yeah.
So we went to Prague and Amsterdam and Toronto, and then we did seminars in Arizona. But long story short, he had never seen a powerlifter that explosive, even in upper body.
Yeah.
But I mean, you think about it, at 2014, I'd already been training speed work for almost 15 years.
Well, didn't you for a while, okay, correct me if I'm wrong here, because obviously you're training better than I, but didn't you go like really light with your speed work, like 20, 30%?
Well, yeah, I was training between 30 and 40%. But that's bar weight. So if you're basing it off of bar weight, 200 pounds is 30% to a 600 pound bencher.
Yeah. Yeah.
But 200 pounds at 1 meters per second.
That's what I'm saying, though. That's
you got to be explosive, strong to do that. But yeah, Louis and I would always get into arguments because we had the Tendo units, and I would say, "Why are we moving at 0.7 meters per second when we should be moving faster than that?"
Yeah.
And he'd be like, "Why do you need to move faster than that?" I was like, "Because we're already moving so slow in the equipment."
Yes.
Especially on the eccentric, that we need to contrast that with something even lighter. He's like, "Well, it's Prolipin, and these guys say this 50 to 60. And I said, "That's true, but all of their lifts are fast in Olympic lifting."
That's a great point.
We only have one day that's fast. And I said, and they're not straining like we strain on heavy day.
No.
Because even if you finish an Olympic lift, it's still fast.
Yeah.
You can't grind a snatch.
Yes. No.
You snap it, you might have to grind standing up with it, but the actual snatch itself
is fast.
Is a second.
Yeah.
So in powerlifting, you don't have a time limit. So you might have a concentric phase that lasts anywhere from 3.5 to 7 to 8 seconds.
Yeah.
If it's truly near isometric maximal, you're going to have to grind the fuck out of that thing.
Yeah.
And Fred Hatfield always talked about compensatory acceleration being in the low 70 percentile. But it's difficult because back then they didn't have accommodative resistance. So the trick, I can draw a small graph real quick. The trick is, you have your force velocity curve that looks like that, right?
Yeah.
So when you train with chains and bands, you actually move the weight to the dotted line.
Yes.
So in compensatory acceleration in Hatfield's ideal, it has to be heavier up the line.
Yep.
But at a lighter weight, with accommodative resistance, you can train lighter and get the same amount of force production in that point.
Yeah.
So more like where this peaks, see?
Yeah.
So you have limiting ability to use free weights for speed work because you've already over accelerated. The hardest point in heavy free weights is the bottom.
Yes.
Once you've already moved it, it's already an acceleration, it's already lighter.
Yes.
To a basic person is like, why does a car get 25 miles a gallon on the highway and only 17 in the city? Because it's not starting and stopping. So now what would that gas mileage be in the highway if you're slightly applying the brakes?
Yeah. That's
it's
a great
analogy.
Hell in a
handbasket.
Yeah. That's a
but
great
for
analogy.
muscle tissue, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
You need to be driving on the highway with your brakes applied.
Yeah. I love it, dude. Okay. I've taken a lot of your time, but I got a couple of lightning round-ish.
We're good, man.
Just fun questions. I mean, it's always fun when we catch up. I'm just going to make you do this every 6 to 12 months because these are just fun.
No, just make it 4.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Okay. Lightning round. Number 1, bro, did I see Iron Mike Tyson using one of your machines here lately?
Yeah. Whoever's coaching him, which I don't know, he'll probably message me if he sees this. They ordered one of my tricep machines and didn't say who or what it was for.
Right.
And I was as surprised as you guys to see him using it.
That's so cool, dude.
Right? I know. And I wish it got more publicity on that. You know what I mean? It's like somebody actually sent that to me on a DM. It's like, dude, Mike Tyson's using your tricep machine. Nobody told me.
That's wild. Did you actually meet him?
What's that?
Did you actually meet him at some point?
Yeah, I met him in 2014 when I was speaking in Vegas at an NSCA conference for tactical. He was living in the M Resort, and I was lifting in the gym in the basement part of it. Well, it was not the basement, but the first floor. And there's a row machine up against the wall, and I'm doing back work.
Yeah.
And I can't see behind me because it's facing the wall.
Yeah.
And I hear this high-pitched voice that only Mike Tyson has.
Yeah.
He's like, God damn, you're big as hell. And I turn around and it's Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
And I'm like 295 at the time, maybe 300, and I'm pretty jacked. Yeah. And I'm like, what's up, Big Mike? And I go out to shake his hand, and it was like shaking a catcher's mitt.
Oh my gosh.
His hand was still strong, felt stronger than mine. I'm like, dude, I would not want to get hit in the face by that guy.
That's
he
wild.
just had these gorilla fucking hands.
Yeah.
And I try not to fanboy, right? So I'm not.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just being like, what's up, Mike? You give him a handshake, and he's fucking grabs my lat, He's like, man, I remember having lats like that in 89, dog. You know what I mean? And I was like, yeah, man, it takes a lot of work. And that was about the end of the conversation. Well, the next day I come in, and this is pretty new at the time. I'm doing hanging kettlebells with the band in my hand.
Yeah.
And so the kettlebell's hanging, so it's, it's wobbly. And I'm laying flat, and I'm looking at the ceiling, and I'm just pressing. And he comes around the corner, and he goes, what the fuck is that? And I said, well, it's chaotic, so it's hard to press. And I made a joke. I was like, it's like Michael J. Fox eating a sandwich, you know what I mean? And he fucking just loses it.
Yeah.
He starts laughing, and he's all joking. He's like, man, do you mind if I try it? And I'm like, yeah, dude. So I set him up, and he's pressing it. And the first rep or two, he looks wobbly.
Yeah.
And dude, by rep 4 or 5, I'm like, tighten your lats and flare it up. And dude, he locked it in like 4 reps, perfect.
Yeah.
With 50-pound kettlebells.
Yeah.
Which anybody's ever tried that, because I'm like, you want to take a lighter kettlebell? He's like, no, man, if some white boy can do it, I can do it. And I'm like, okay. So I give it to him, and the first 3-4 reps, he looks crooked. And then by rep 5, he's fucking just like, boom, boom, looks perfect.
Crushing it.
He's a freaky athlete.
Yeah.
He sets him down. He's like, man, that's some badass shit. And I'm like, hey, can I ask you some questions? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, how'd you get so jacked looking? He goes, man, I'm going to be honest with you. Custom Auto didn't like me lifting weights much, but I would go and hit a 300-pound bag an hour a day from the age of 13 to 20. He goes, because Cuss was like, you're going to box people way bigger than you, and you got to get used to fucking throwing like hard blows. He's like, so when the cameras were on me, I always showed my speed.
Yeah.
But what we kept a secret was my power. He's like, and it wasn't a secret when somebody saw me hit you and I fucking broke a half your ribs.
Yeah.
But he's like, people always thought that was because I was quick. He's like, dude, I was so strong hitting. He's like, the impact just built my bicep and my lat and my shoulder up. Because I was like, you were like one of my major people growing up looking at, goes, I want to be built like that motherfucker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was kind of the end of our conversation. And then, obviously, because I'm a nobody at that time, we never stayed in contact. And it wasn't like social media was like a huge thing.
Sure.
At that time. So, but yeah, that was kind of one of my highlight reels of famous people other than training with Arnold.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. Wait, did you just casually drop? You trained with Arnold too?
Yeah, I trained with Arnold in like 2017.
Really? How was that?
I was out at Venice Beach and I was training with O'Hearn, and O'Hearn goes in and trains at like 4 a.m.
Oof,
so which is fine for me because it's like 7 o'clock back home.
Oh yeah, for sure. You're awake,
right? Well, I'm good. Like, you want to get up at 4? I mean, I get up at like 6:30. So
yeah, no,
cool,
you're good.
Whatever. So it's an advantage. So I get out there, and O'Hearn warms up to like 4:05 on the incline in like 15 minutes. No, I mean, dude's a freak, man. People bust his balls all the time, but he's an animal. So anyway, we trained, and we had a good workout, and I tried to kick his ass, and he tried to kick mine on a couple things.
Yeah.
And as I'm walking out, it's about 7 o'clock, and Arnold's walking in, and Mike's like, "Hey, Matt, meet Arnold, but I got to go to this." He was doing a shoot or doing something like a magazine. He's like, "Hang out with him if you want," and I was like, "Cool, man." Yeah. He's like, "Hi, how are you?" It's like, Mike talks about you all the time. He's like one of the strongest guys in the world, and you train military guys. I'm like, "Yeah, man." I go, "What are you doing today?" He's like, "Oh, I'm old. I'm just fucking around with some biceps, basically." And I was like, "You mind if I just tag along? I'm not going to ask you a bunch of stuff. I just want to hang out." He's like, "Yeah, come on, man." So we go lift, and like he's got this groupie dudes. So we're sitting on the couch just talking shit, and whatever. And I'm again trying not to be a fanboy.
Yeah,
I'm trying to be like it's cool when it's in my brain. It's not cool. It's like insane.
Yeah,
and like 3 or 4 other guys walk in that I don't recognize, and they don't look like lifters. But I don't, it's not my deal. I'm just hanging out. So I'm working out with these guys, and Sylvester Stallone's brother's coming by, and and Arnold's introducing me to him.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, "What's up?" And all the while, I'm like, who are these fucking chodes that are hanging out with Arnold? And they're doing the same exercises.
Right.
But they're built like they're homeless. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so the day goes on, and I shake hands with Arnold, and he leaves. So I go back to my hotel, my apartment, and I come back because Mike's going to come back to the gym and do some small accessory stuff at like 4:30.
Okay.
So I go back at 4:30, and I'm doing some small accessory stuff with Mike, and I'm like, "Mike, who are those fucking douchers that were hanging out with Arnold?" I'm like, "They don't even look like they lift." He goes, "Well, the one doucher invented Siri, the other doucher James Cameron, and the other doucher was some huge like real estate mogul in Hollywood." And I said, "Oh, I get it. I'm the doucher." He goes, "Yeah, in that crowd, you're the doucher."
Yeah.
And I was like,
wow.
"Oh, that's cool." So that was those were 2 big like training with star moments that you look back now and you're like, I was so lucky to be able to like just happen to run into those people.
Yeah.
And then have enough respect like from them that they let me like hang out with them like I was a friend instead of just, "Oh yeah, here's an autograph. Get the fuck out of here." You know what I mean?
No, that's amazing, dude. That's really cool. That's really cool. All right. Number 2. What's your favorite piece of equipment that you built over the years and why?
Well, I mean, all of them are great, but the belt squat's the one that I think really hammered out, me and you both working with Dr. Newton gave me a whole different respect for leverages and movement patterns. And
Yeah.
so I really took a lot of pride in making that machine perfect as far as its dimensions and how it reacted to
Yep.
squat patterns. And with how we've sold it to like the Panthers and the Lakers and the Eagles and the Chiefs, I think it's did the most difference. We're getting ready to sell some to the Padres, and then we've sold some to the Cavs. And we
Okay.
built them custom for the basketball players, and they're a foot taller on the arm, so they actually work correct with guys that are really tall.
Yeah.
So that machine's probably done the most as far as out in the public.
Yeah.
I just wish that general fitness gyms would catch on to the performance sector equipment building instead of just buying stuff that general fitness people train with. Because like you and I
Right.
both know, you go into like a normal Lifetime Fitness or Anytime Fitness, there is no equipment in there that's really going to help lower injury rates, even general population.
Right.
It's basic bullshit that either insurance companies are mandating or the people ordering equipment have no idea what they're buying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I wish every place had a belt squat, man.
they should, because I really think now as I've gotten older and seen a lot of general population people, not everyone needs to squat with a straight bar. I think that you can progress yourself to it eventually, but
For sure.
I think there's just some people that are just scared of the movement itself, the free weight itself, and the danger of itself. I mean, I posted a video, not maybe less than a year ago, of a guy dying doing back squats because he tried to dump it over his head and it broke his neck.
Oh yeah.
And
that's scary, man.
It's scary, and I think that people see that on social media and like, screw that exercise, it's not worth it. And the machine that we build has an adjustable spotter built into it. So if you fail at the bottom, you can unclick yourself and you don't have to worry about getting crushed.
Yeah.
And so, although I would hope that most people would, in some point of their life, learn how to back squat with a barbell, and both you and I know that in all reality, there are far fewer coaches than people realize that I would trust to teach that movement.
Yeah.
And do it in a progression that's safe for someone.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
So
that's a great point.
I think that probably is the piece of equipment that can and has made the most difference.
Yeah. No, I love it. Okay. This is always a tough one, but I want to skew it towards you. Okay. If you could go back in time and change anything about your training, what would it be?
It'd be the one point in my life that I feel like I didn't have any control, which would have been when I was a kid, in just how my mom and dad fed me. You know, we grew up in kind of a rural part of Indiana. Both of you and I did.
Yeah.
Parents didn't know a ton about diet.
Yeah.
You know, the fast food industry was booming in the 80s, just starting to be basically people's daily diet.
Yeah.
You know, my dad was a trucker, so he ate like fucking garbage. So on the weekends when he was home, it was not good selections of food.
Yep.
My mom grew up insanely poor, so she thought just having food was a good thing. And I think that if I could have changed how I ate from the age of 3 to 4 all the way up to around 16, 18, where I started to learn more about what to do, I think that would have been one thing I could have changed. But in reality, I think some of that was out of my control.
Yeah.
The other thing I think I could have go back and change it would have been interesting to see how much I could have squatted if I'd have never been hit by a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think about that all the time. I'm like, the amount of work that I had to put in to squat those numbers was probably far higher than anyone that had ever broke world records before.
Yeah.
Just based on the fact of where I had to start.
Yeah.
And that I'm not using that as an excuse, because I feel like I went further than I ever thought I would. But I always look back now and think, what if I wouldn't have had those injuries? Or where would I have been if I wouldn't have been laying up for a year in a hospital bed?
Yeah.
In a developmental year.
Yeah.
You know, in a year where it's very important for skill and, you know, hand-eye coordination and, you know, acquisition of certain skills. And I had almost a whole year cut off of that at a developmental stage.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Okay. Last but not least, what's next for Matt Wenning? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Anything?
Well, you know, I'm always doing R&D on equipment, you know, so that could change. New pieces could come out. That's kind of been stalled since the economy's been real shitty for the last year and a half. I mean, you know, just going and ordering steel to fuck around with is so expensive now.
Yeah.
But probably just working on keep building the passive income, like with the Patreon channel and the Train Heroic, and we have almost 1,150 members on Patreon now,
That's amazing.
which is awesome.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
keep growing that. And I think the problem is people are slowly starting to see the quality in which we provide that the average other companies are doing that's so much more cookie cutter, in my opinion.
Yes.
That once they get in there and see the quality of it, it's hard for them to leave. So for me, that's it. But educationally, I mean, Patreon keeps me reading because I post my books there.
Yeah.
So I try to post a book every other week. So that means I read a book, maybe not in
Yep.
its entirety, but I find the hot spots to to sticky note and make notes on and then post those notes so somebody's not having to dig through it and
Oh, that's
find all
cool.
the fine-tuned things, which keeps me fresh.
Yeah, for sure.
Doing stuff like that, I think, is working towards it. I think I'm at that point in my career where I'm at almost year 20 of doing in-person coaching.
Yeah.
I'm getting fucking fried. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's energy
So
intensive.
it's intensive, especially when you're like us and care
Yeah, for sure.
and want to see people get better. But that'll always be a small part of what I do, just based on the fact that I think that a lot of coaches, when they get to a certain point where they can flip everything to passive, I think the problem is they lose touch with what is reality.
Yeah.
You start seeing people like what I saw last week is like you see people writing 12 and 14 workouts in a workout because they're not doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? How many times have we
You just
seen
lose
that from
perspective, right?
interns or people? You lose perspective. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm going to go in the gym here in a minute, but and I still train. So I don't know. I think just learning to enjoy the process of just staying strong and just maintaining a workload. And that was the other reason I retired, is because like I'll compete 2 more years and hate lifting so much I'll never want to do it again, or I can stop now and I'll still want to stay in shape the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
That was a big draw to that as well from the previous questions. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, where do you go after you break world records and get a doctorate? How far can you go in anything else? I mean,
Right.
it's kind of daunting. It's like I've almost completed a lifetime of achievements and I'm only 45, but I don't really know. Well, I don't really know what's next. I just keep driving to whatever I just feel like I need to. So it's hard to say what'll be happening in 2 to 3 years, but I think all of it will be positive.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you'll figure it out, man. Well, Matt, it's been amazing. I love chatting with you every time. It's just so much fun. I feel like I learn. I'm entertained. We always have good chats. And
Let's come up with some kind of a different topic in say around February or so.
I love it. And
then we'll attack something else. Give me a couple of days notice or a couple of weeks notice, and I'll dig around and make some really good notes and give you guys some really good info.
Dude, that would be sick. Where can my listeners find out more about you, my guy?
Well, if you go to Winning Strong on Instagram, no spaces, and then winningstrength.com is the website.
Yep.
We're on Winning Strength on Patreon. So if you want to see workouts that I do both with myself and my clients and my contracts, I post almost all of that there. Train Heroic has a tactical subscription. Winning Strength Tactical is what we do with the fire departments and the police departments that we work with. And then we have a conjugate one that puts what we do in the gym in a Train Heroic app style. What I like about the Train Heroic is that it calculates your volume and it asks you your mood and it adjusts things accordingly. And it has videos next to the exercises for people that I would consider beginner, intermediate, so they can see a professional do it.
Yep.
And then do the best to emulate it without paying for the high level cost of having that professional coach.
Yep.
So those are our bigger platforms. And then obviously I have about 600 videos on my YouTube channel, Winning Strength.
Yes. I'll make sure I put links to all the show notes. So if you're listening and you want to learn more about Matt, I've kind of already done that based on the fact that we've recorded this before. But I've got it all in there. So make sure, go to the show notes, follow Matt. He's just a wealth of knowledge, and again, just an awesome human being. So, Matt, my guy, thank you so much for coming on, brother. I appreciate it.
I'll see you in Indianapolis here in the next week or two once I get a hold of JC.
I love it, man. I love it. All right. Thanks again, brother.
Later, dude.